You walk into a room and feel the weight before a word is spoken. One look, one tone, one careless comment, and suddenly your entire inner world starts to crumble. You replay the moment. You analyze what they meant. You question your value, your strength, your presence. That's not just sensitivity. That's the result of emotional vulnerability left unchecked. And if you don't face it now, it will define every moment of your life. You've built your goals, your strategies, your ambitions, but your emotional intelligence is still underdeveloped. And when a man has power without control, he is a ticking time bomb. Because no matter how much he achieves, one criticism, one failure, one painful memory can send him spiraling back to the ground. You've been told to toughen up, to not care, to ignore the pain. But that's not strength. That's suppression. And suppressed emotion doesn't vanish. It multiplies. It leaks. It controls you from the shadows. Emotional strength isn't the absence of feeling. It's the ability to master what you feel. And mastery begins with awareness. That means naming the pain, facing the reaction, understanding why criticism slices so deep. You're not weak for feeling. You're weak for avoiding the responsibility of understanding what you feel. And that's where emotional intelligence begins, not in theory, in brutal, honest self-assessment. Napoleon Hill taught that thoughts are things, and emotions are the fuel behind those thoughts. If you let criticism trigger chaos, if you let rejection steal your focus, if you let pain dictate your identity, you are not thinking. You are reacting, and a man who lives in reaction will never dominate because his power is temporary, his discipline is situational, and his self-respect depends on external silence. But life will not be silent. People will judge. Pain will hit. And you must become the kind of man who stands unshaken in the middle of emotional war. That's what emotional intelligence really is, not a buzzword, not some soft, abstract idea. It is the battle armor of the elite. It is the mental shield that lets you take a hit without losing your direction, without falling apart, without turning every critique into a catastrophe. And you don't get that armor from reading about it. You get it by training under fire, by confronting the exact moments that once made you spiral, by deciding that no external voice will ever again be louder than your internal standard. Ask yourself, why do certain words still hurt you? Why do you still flinch when people question you? Why does one piece of negative feedback echo louder than 100 victories? That's not emotion. That's a lack of control, and control is what separates men who lead from men who crumble. The emotionally intelligent man doesn't avoid pain. He understands it. He doesn't suppress it. He studies it. And then he acts in full control of it. That's what makes him dangerous, because he cannot be manipulated. He cannot be baited. He cannot be shaken. And if that's not who you are yet, then this is the moment you start becoming him. No more hiding behind, "I'm just sensitive." No more pretending you're okay when you're breaking inside. No more letting your emotional reaction become your reputation. From this point forward, you are in training, and this is your battlefield. You don't develop emotional intelligence in comfort. You develop it in chaos, in criticism, in confrontation. You develop it when someone calls you out, and instead of defending, you listen. When someone disrespects you, and instead of exploding, you assess. When pain hits, and instead of numbing it, you feel it without losing yourself. That is strength. That is mastery. That is the beginning of becoming unbreakable. And it's not just about being strong, it's about being clear. Because emotional intelligence gives you clarity when everything else is noise. When you're emotionally intelligent, you don't just survive pain, you use it. You don't just handle criticism, you extract power from it. You don't just absorb emotion, you direct it. That's the difference, that's the edge, and that's the version of you we build here. So ask again, who are you when pain shows up? Who are you when your name is disrespected, when your motives are questioned, when your image is attacked? Because that version of you, that raw, reactive, wounded version, that's the one we must confront. That's the one we must train, because that's the one who has been making too many decisions. But now the disciplined version takes over, the clear version, the one who leads with awareness, not wounds, the one who doesn't need to control everything around him, because he's in full command of what's inside him. That's emotional intelligence, and it is the most powerful tool you'll ever possess. Start now. Track your next reaction. Pause before you respond. Ask yourself, what is this pain teaching me? What is this criticism exposing in me? And what does my response say about my standard? Then act, not from emotion, but from clarity, from strength, from presence. And when you do, you begin to rewire who you are. You begin to replace the fragile with the formidable, the volatile with the controlled, the wounded with the wise. And once you start that path, you never stop. You get stronger every time pain hits and you don't flinch, every time criticism comes and you don't collapse, every time the old emotional patterns scream and you act anyway. That is emotional dominance. That is masculine emotional intelligence. And that is the code we live by here. Comment below the moment that used to break you, then tell me how you're rewriting it now. Let it be public. Let it be permanent. And if this message lit something inside you, share it. Be the man who helps. Another stop running from his own pain, then like this video, not for the channel, for yourself. Let it be the signal that you are done being emotionally fragile, and subscribe. Because here, we don't medicate emotion. We master it. We train under the fire of Napoleon Hill. We rise through clarity. We build strength in silence. And we dominate. With precision, presence, and unshakable peace. The pain doesn't stop. The world doesn't stop. But now you don't either. Now you lead, now you own, now you rise. You've lived most of your life reacting to tone, reacting to silence, reacting to energy in the room, reacting to the imaginary narratives. You build in your head every time someone criticizes, ignores, questions, or disagrees with you. And in that pattern, you have become a slave to your emotions. You tell yourself it's just your nature, that you're highly sensitive, that you just feel deeply. But the truth is far simpler and far more dangerous. You have never trained your emotional intelligence. You've let pain teach you how to feel, but you've never taught yourself how to lead with it. And that's why you still fall apart when things don't go your way. You've achieved things. Yes, you've learned, you've grown, but growth without emotional control is glass. It looks strong until pressure hits, and when it shatters, you don't just break, you bleed. You bleed on people who didn't cut you. You react with volume when clarity was needed. You walk away when you should stand. You shrink when you should rise. And all because no one ever told you that emotional strength is not about suppressing pain. It's about mastering your reaction to it. I, Napoleon Hill, knew the power of the inner world. I taught men to control their thoughts, not because it sounds poetic, but because thoughts, when emotionally charged, become the architects of reality. And if your emotions are undisciplined, then your thoughts are ungoverned. And if your thoughts are ungoverned, your results are inconsistent, chaotic, and dangerous. That's why emotional intelligence is not optional. It is the foundation of mastery. Because until you can sit with discomfort without being controlled by it, you're still a child in a man's body. Ask yourself, how do you respond when someone questions your work? When someone mocks your effort? When someone challenges your position? Do you get defensive, passive-aggressive? Do you withdraw into silence and carry the resentment like a shield? Or do you respond like a builder, like a leader, like a man who understands that not every challenge is an attack, and not every attack deserves a reaction? The emotionally intelligent man doesn't react. He responds. He doesn't explode. He evaluates. He doesn't run. He recalibrates. Because he knows that his emotional reaction is not about the other person. It's about him, his triggers, his patterns, his beliefs, and those beliefs can either be a prison or a weapon, but they must be trained, they must be tested, they must be confronted. So how do you train emotional intelligence? You stop blaming and start owning. You stop saying, that's just how I am, and start saying, this is what I'm becoming. You stop avoiding the emotional mirror and you stare into it until you see clearly the anger, the insecurity, the jealousy, the fear. You don't run, you don't shame yourself, you dissect it, you learn from it, you become a scientist of your own emotional world. And that science turns into strategy, and that strategy turns into power. Most men never do this. They build muscle but never build mind. They chase money but never chase mastery. They work hard but they're still fragile. One disagreement and they fold. One insult and they break. One betrayal and they collapse. Because they never learned how to process pain. They only learned how to perform. But performance without processing leads to breakdown. And that breakdown, left unresolved, turns into a life where you achieve everything on paper but still feel powerless on the inside. But not you, not anymore. Because now you know the truth. You know that emotional strength is not loud. It's silent. It's not showy. It's grounded. It's not reactive. It's unshakable. And that unshakable presence is what makes a man unstoppable. Because no matter what chaos surrounds him, he remains still, focused, intentional, clear. That's the goal. That's the training. And it starts today. No more avoiding feedback. No more fearing confrontation. No more running from emotional discomfort. Instead, you lean in. You open yourself up to the pain. You invite it. You say, come, show me where I'm still weak. And then you do the work, the real work. The work of rewiring your responses, refining your focus, and reclaiming control over your own nervous system. You want to be emotionally intelligent? Then take ownership of your voice, of your silence, of your body language, of your triggers. Study them, master them, learn to predict your reactions before they happen, and then interrupt them. Replace them, reinforce new ones, over and over again, until your new default is discipline. And yes, it will be hard, because you've spent years being conditioned to react, to take things personally, to protect your ego. But emotional intelligence is not about ego, it's about expansion. It's about making room for discomfort and not needing to change it, not needing to fix it, just sitting with it until it loses its power. So what's next? Simple. Take the last moment you lost control, the last time criticism got the best of you, the last time pain rewired your whole day. Write it down, dissect it. What triggered you? What belief did it activate? What story did you tell yourself about that moment? And how did that story affect your behavior? That's your blueprint. That's your curriculum. That's your next breakthrough. Comment below your breakthrough moment. What pain are you reclaiming? What reaction are you rewriting? And if this message cut deep, share it. Be the signal for another man to rise out of reaction and into resilience. Then, like this video, let it be the sound of you choosing to train what others ignore, and subscribe, because here we don't run from emotion, we dominate it with the philosophy of Napoleon Hill, with presence, with fire, with unshakable identity. Now move, train, lead. The man who used to fall apart, he's done. And the man who responds with clarity, he's just getting started. You've spent most of your energy trying to protect yourself from what people might say, from how they might interpret your words, from how they might react to your truth. And in doing so, you've given them power they never deserved. You've allowed their opinions to become your emotional thermostat. If they approve, you rise. If they criticize, you crumble. That's not emotional intelligence, that's emotional slavery. And the cost of living that way is enormous, because every time you adjust who you are based on someone else's response, you move further away from who you're meant to become. You dilute your fire, you filter your presence. You operate like someone trying to survive when you were born to dominate. But domination doesn't start on the outside. It starts in the mind. It starts in the emotional core of a man who is no longer available for weakness, no longer willing to excuse immaturity, no longer tolerating the old patterns of insecurity masked as sensitivity. You're not here to be sensitive. You're here to be sharp. You're here to be surgical with your words, intentional with your presence, and lethal with your discipline. That's what emotional intelligence makes possible. Not softness, not passivity, precision, power, posture. Napoleon Hill taught that clarity is the source of all mastery. And you will never have clarity if your emotions are constantly in control. Because emotion without mastery is noise. It distorts, it dramatizes, it exaggerates. And that noise becomes your narrative. You tell yourself stories that aren't true, stories about why you can't succeed, why you're not respected, why you're not supported. And none of it is based on fact. It's based on the feelings of a man who never trained himself to filter truth from emotion. And that training is no longer optional. It starts with radical awareness. When someone criticizes you, pause. When someone attacks your ideas, pause. When someone doubts your ambition, pause. And in that pause, you analyze. You ask, what exactly did I feel? What exactly am I making this mean? What reaction is this moment trying to trigger? Because your first reaction is not the real you, it's the untrained version of you. And if you keep letting him lead, you will keep losing silently. But here's the shift. The more you pause, the more you see. The more you see, the more you choose. And the more you choose, the more you lead. That's the formula. That's emotional leadership. That's the core of emotional intelligence. Deciding your state instead of reacting to it. Building mental clarity through disciplined emotional behavior. Because discipline is not just about doing the work. It's about doing it without letting emotion disrupt your direction. The emotionally intelligent man is not cold. He's controlled. He's not numb. He's neutral. He feels everything, but he obeys nothing except his standard, his code, his mission. And because of that, he's impossible to derail. You can't manipulate a man who is rooted. You can't intimidate a man who is aligned. You can't outlast a man who leads from within. And yes, it will take time. Because emotional maturity is not built overnight. You've spent years reacting, years letting pain dictate your patterns. But now you train. You train every day. In every conversation, in every moment of resistance, you treat every emotional trigger like a rep in the gym. And just like physical muscle, emotional muscle is built through pressure. So when the next insult comes, thank it. It's training. When the next rejection comes, welcome it. It's resistance. When the next wave of shame or insecurity rises, observe it. It's fuel, not for self-pity, for self-mastery, because now you don't chase peace, you build power. And that power is not for show, it's for strategy, it's for impact, it's for war. Ask yourself right now, where do your emotions still control you? Where do you still flinch? Where do you still carry pain from words spoken years ago? That's your battlefield. That's your next breakthrough. And that breakthrough will not come from understanding, it will come from application, from acting in opposition to the reaction, from choosing strength when emotion screams for comfort. You've heard enough. You've studied enough. You've repeated the same patterns long enough. Now it's time to act differently, to move as the man you've claimed to be. And that man doesn't react. He responds. That man doesn't flinch. He focuses. That man doesn't question his identity because someone else is uncomfortable with it. He owns it. So take inventory. Write down the last 3 times you lost emotional control. What triggered it? What story did you tell yourself? What could you have done instead? And now, next time it happens, you execute the new response. You move with discipline. You train. You lead. Comment below the moment that showed you who you need to become. Let the world see the man who's choosing mastery over emotion. And if this message rewired your frame, share it. Let another man hear what no one else had the courage to say. Then like this video. Not for me, for you, as proof that your emotional training has begun. And subscribe, because here we don't suppress pain. We study it, we lead it, we weaponize it. Through the discipline of Napoleon Hill, through mental precision, through emotional command. Your reaction is not your identity. Your emotion is not your enemy. Your sensitivity is not your story. This is your story now. Total control. Relentless. Discipline. Unbreakable leadership. Let it begin. You wake up and you already feel it. That tension in your chest. That invisible pressure behind your thoughts. That whisper of doubt hiding beneath your routine. It's not fear of failure. It's fear of being seen while not being perfect. It's the pressure to appear unshakable when inside you're managing storms no one else can see. That's the cost of low emotional intelligence. And no one talks about it. No one teaches men how to feel without being owned by those feelings. So you either suppress it or let it consume you, but you never master it until now. Because mastering your emotional intelligence isn't optional anymore. Not if you want to lead, not if you want to build something that lasts, not if you want to stop bleeding in silence every time life applies pressure. And pressure is constant. The world will not become gentler for your emotions. So you must become stronger in how you process them. That starts with one principle. Emotions are messengers, not masters. They tell you what's happening. They don't get to decide what you do about it. That's your job. That's your power. And that's what most men have never been taught. I, Napoleon Hill, didn't write for the emotionally comfortable. I wrote for the men who were at war, with themselves, with their doubts, with their old stories. Because that war is where strength is forged, not in silence, but in self-command. You want emotional strength? Stop waiting to feel calm. Start building clarity. Clarity comes from confronting the very feelings that make you flinch, the very voices that tell you to hide. You hear them, and you move anyway. That's how you build emotional dominance. You do the thing that fear told you to delay. You walk into the room, your self-doubt said to avoid. You speak what shame told you to stay silent about, because every time you act against that voice, you reduce its control. And every time you obey it, you reinforce its power. This is not philosophy. This is strategy. And your results depend on it. So where do you start? You start by observing your triggers, not reacting, observing. Where does your tone shift? Where does your chest tighten? Where do your thoughts spiral? Those are not flaws, they are maps. They show you where your training is weak. They show you where you need reinforcement. And the emotionally intelligent man doesn't ignore them. He studies them. He uses them. You feel judged? That's a signal. You feel rejected? That's a clue. You feel invisible, that's data. But only if you're willing to face it. If you keep running from it, numbing it, denying it, you will never win. Because emotional intelligence isn't comfort. It's confrontation. It's discipline. It's the decision to sit in the heat without burning. To hold the tension without reacting. To hear the insult and not let it rewrite your story. But how do you build that kind of control? You build it by breaking the pattern. Every time you want to withdraw, lean in. Every time you want to attack, pause. Every time you want to explain, breathe. You're not just managing moments, you're rewiring your mind. And that rewiring is how emotional maturity is formed. Because real strength isn't loud, it's stable. It's not performance, it's presence. The kind of presence that doesn't shift based on the room. That doesn't lower based on opinion. That doesn't explode based on discomfort. You want to be respected? Master your emotional energy, because people follow certainty, they trust stability, and they elevate those who can lead not just in logic, but in emotion. So here's your next move. Choose one relationship, one environment, one area where you've been emotionally inconsistent, and today you rewrite the pattern. Not tomorrow, not next week, today. You show up differently, you speak with precision, you listen without reacting, you lead without being triggered, and when the old reaction rises, you catch it, you slow it down, you redirect it, and that right there is progress. Comment below what emotional trigger you're taking control of. Declare it, own it, make it your next victory. And if this message burned through your old frame, share it. Let another man know that mastery is possible. Then, like this video. Let it mark the moment your training got serious, and subscribe. Because here, we don't avoid emotion, we forge mastery. With the fire of Napoleon Hill, with clarity, with action, with unshakable emotional intelligence. Now move. You've been told that to be a man is to be strong, and to be strong is to suppress, to bury what you feel, to walk it off, to lock it down. But that's not strength, that's emotional avoidance disguised as masculinity, and it's a lie that's cost you more than you realize. It's cost you clarity, it's cost you connection, it's cost you control. Because anything you suppress controls you, and if you can't face your emotion, you'll keep being driven by it in the dark. That's why emotional intelligence is not soft, it's savage, it's brutal self-honesty. It's choosing to see the things that make you uncomfortable and lead anyway. That's the difference between fragile men and focused leaders. You can't fix what you're unwilling to face, and most men don't face themselves. They distract, they overwork, they mask it with humor, with anger, with sarcasm, with silence. But the silence doesn't heal you. It just prolongs the wound, and eventually that wound infects your leadership, your decisions, your relationships. It turns into irrational reactions, chronic procrastination, passive-aggressive behavior, and sudden emotional breakdowns that nobody saw coming. Because the man never learned how to carry pressure without collapsing. But now you will, because I, Napoleon Hill, wrote about thinking accurately. And you cannot think accurately if your emotions are distorting your perspective, if you make every criticism a personal attack, if you make every pain a permanent narrative, if you let temporary emotions create permanent decisions, you'll destroy everything you're building. But emotional intelligence gives you the weapon to stop that destruction. It gives you the pause, the processing, the clarity to respond instead of react. And that is a weapon in this world, because most men are slaves to their emotional history. They're still reacting to things that happened 5 years ago, 10 years ago, still living in patterns inherited from men who never healed. But your legacy demands better, so here's the truth. Emotional pain doesn't destroy you. Repressed pain does, because it doesn't go away. It hardens, it hides, it rewrites your confidence, and it becomes a default response to every challenge. So you stop showing up. You stop being bold. You start playing safe. You call it strategy, but it's fear. You call it humility, but it's avoidance. And every time you obey that fear, you lower your own ceiling. But when you train emotional intelligence, you start raising it again. Because you're no longer reacting like a wounded boy. You're responding like a trained man. You begin to see criticism as feedback, not failure. You see conflict as a chance to grow, not a threat to avoid. You hear rejection and no longer translate it into identity. And that level of control is rare, because it's earned through repetition, through challenge, through choosing discipline when your body screams for comfort. How do you build it? Daily, in the little moments. When you feel heat rising and you don't lash out, when you feel fear creeping and you don't run, when someone disrespects you and you correct it with strength, not ego. These are the reps. This is your mental gym. and you show up to it the same way you would to any physical training, relentlessly. And as you train, you'll notice the shift. You'll become calmer under pressure, sharper in conflict, clearer in pain. You won't feel less, you'll feel more, but with control, with direction, with force. Because now your emotions serve your mission. They no longer sabotage it. That's real power. That's what emotional intelligence unlocks. You will be misunderstood. You will be criticized. You will be attacked, but you won't be shaken. Because you're not leading from emotion anymore. You're leading from mastery. And mastery can't be faked. It can't be mimicked. It's felt. When you enter a room, people know. Not because you speak louder, but because your energy is calm. Your movement is deliberate. Your presence is grounded. That's what changes things. That's what builds trust. That's what creates impact. So now the question is simple. Who are you when it hurts? Who are you when things go wrong? Who are you when you're not winning? Because that's where real strength is exposed. That's where emotional intelligence becomes visible. Not when everything is smooth, but when everything's on fire. Comment below the moment that used to break you and tell me how you will lead through it now. And if this message snapped something inside you, share it. Let another man see that he's not alone in this training. Then, like this video, let it mark the day you chose to lead with clarity, not chaos. And subscribe, because here we don't just talk about strength, we build it with the fire of Napoleon Hill, with thought discipline, with emotional execution. Let's go. You've been trying to protect your reputation, your relationships, your image. But what you haven't protected is your state, your inner state. And that's the root of every setback you keep repeating. Because a man who does not guard his emotional state will sabotage everything he builds without even noticing. It's subtle. One bad conversation and your mood shifts. One critical look and your confidence drops. One old memory resurfaces and your entire day derails. That's not bad luck. That's poor emotional conditioning. And until you train it, you'll live at the mercy of everything outside of you. That's not power, that's dependence. And you're not here to be dependent, you're here to dominate. Domination starts in the mind, not with control of others, but with command of self. That's why emotional intelligence isn't about being sensitive. It's about being surgical, cutting through your own emotional noise to reach the signal, the truth, the mission. Because emotions will rise, they will cloud, they will distort. But the trained man knows how to separate sensation from standard. He feels everything, but obeys only the code. That code is not reactive, it's decisive. It says, I don't lower because they're loud. I don't hesitate because I'm triggered. I don't fold because I'm uncomfortable. I act from clarity, not from chaos. And that clarity is built through pressure, through moments when your old self would have collapsed, but your trained self now leads. That is emotional intelligence in action. I, Napoleon Hill, wrote about the power of a definite purpose. But purpose without emotional control is useless. You'll know what to do, but be too triggered to do it. You'll have the vision, but lack the stability to execute it. You'll have the plan, but be paralyzed by the first emotional wave. That's the cost of immaturity. That's the reality of men who refuse to master their inner world. So how do you master it? You build rituals of reflection. Every night you look back and ask, where did I react today? What triggered me? What emotion took the wheel? And more importantly, what should I have done differently? This is not about shame, it's about strategy. You're collecting data on yourself. And that data is gold, because it reveals the blueprint of your emotional patterns. And once you see the pattern, you can start to break it. You also build by raising the standard of your inputs. What you watch, who you listen to, what you read, who you surround yourself with. Emotional intelligence is not just internal, it's environmental. If your circle is full of reactors, you'll train yourself to do the same. But if your environment is filled with men of presence, of posture, of discipline, your entire nervous system starts to shift. You begin to mirror mastery, and that's not motivation, that's biology. You become what you surround yourself with, then you train in real time. You catch the next insult, the next disrespect, the next moment where someone touches an emotional nerve, and instead of defaulting to your old behavior, you choose your new identity. You breathe, you observe, you lead, not from ego, from evolution, from a man who has studied himself enough to never be surprised by his own reactions. That's the goal. Not to suppress, but to predict. Not to ignore, but to navigate. Not to fake calm, but to become it. Because the calmest man in the room is always the most dangerous. He's not numb, he's lethal. Because he's not distracted by emotion, he's directed by mission. You want to be that man? Then start now. Choose the one place in your life where your emotions still hijack you. Maybe it's in conflict. Maybe it's with rejection. Maybe it's when you feel disrespected. Find that trigger. And today, train in it. Don't run from it. Don't avoid it. Move toward it. Let it confront you. Let it test you. And then let your new standard lead. Comment below your emotional trigger. Name it, own it, kill it. And if this message gave you the blueprint, share it. Let another man train beside you in this war. Then, like this video, let it mark the day your reactions stopped leading your life, and subscribe. Because here, we don't cope with emotion, we command it, with Napoleon Hill's fire, with focus, with emotional intelligence forged in pressure. Let's build. You keep showing up, but you're not really present. You speak, but part of you holds back. You move forward, but your emotions are dragging anchors behind you. That's what happens when emotional intelligence is missing. You function, but you don't flow. You push, but you don't lead. Because you're still giving too much power to things that shouldn't even have access to your peace. A glance, a tone, a delay, a rejection, and you feel it all too deeply. You hold on to it, you replay it, you let it mold your next decision. And that's not being emotionally aware. That's being emotionally owned. And it has to stop. You were not built to be a sponge for criticism. You were built to be a fire that burns through noise. But fire needs fuel. And the fuel of emotional strength is clarity, clear identity, clear values, clear standards. When those things are set in stone, no opinion can chip away at you. No rejection can rewrite you. No pain can derail you. Because you're not reacting. You're remembering who you are. You're locked in. You're trained. That's emotional intelligence at its core. Not to avoid emotion, but to be so rooted in who you are that emotion cannot move you from mission. Napoleon Hill didn't just teach about success. I taught about control. The ability to control your own mind, especially under pressure, especially in chaos, especially when everything feels personal. Because the mind that is trained will always outlast the mind that's triggered. And right now, most men are triggered by rejection, by stress, by pain, by anything that threatens their fragile identity. But that identity isn't real. It's just a placeholder. It's what fills the space when a man hasn't yet built something. Unshakable, but you're not that man anymore. You're building the real thing now. A version of you that no longer reacts to noise, that no longer bends to pressure, that no longer collapses when things don't go as planned. This version of you leads with presence, with awareness, with the full authority of a man who has trained under fire and come out stronger every time. But to build that version, you have to let go of the old stories. The ones that told you it's normal to overthink everything, that it's okay to fall apart when criticized, that it's noble to carry emotional wounds like trophies. It's not noble. It's not normal. It's weakness, dressed up in poetic language. And if you keep wearing it, you'll keep losing. You have to see the truth. Emotional triggers are not signs that something is wrong with the world. They're signs that something is still unresolved in you, and your job is not to blame others for hitting your triggers. Your job is to disarm them, to neutralize them, to train them until they no longer own you. That's how leaders operate. That's how kings build empires, not through emotion but through execution. So here's how you train now. You pick one moment from your past that still carries weight, one moment you still replay, one conversation that still stings, and you dissect it, not as a victim but as a strategist. What belief was activated? What reaction did it trigger? What weakness did it expose? That is your curriculum, that is your classroom, and now you go to war with it, you reframe it, you replace it, you train against it, you put yourself in situations that resemble it, and you lead through them, again and again, until that old wound becomes your new weapon, until what used to shake you now sharpens you. That's the transformation, that's the shift. That's what emotional intelligence does. It makes pain your teacher instead of your master. And with each rep, you become harder to offend, harder to destabilize, harder to manipulate. Because you're not reacting to people, you're responding to principle. You're not led by feeling, you're led by mission. And that kind of man, he's rare, he's respected, he's remembered. So decide now. What are you still letting control you emotionally? What trigger is still dictating your tone, your timing, your tension? Find it, face it, train it, and don't stop until it breaks. Until you can stand in the same room, hear the same insult, feel the same tension, and move through it like fire through paper. Comment below the trigger you're ready to dismantle. Declare it, train it, kill it. And if this message exposed the weakness you've been hiding, share it. Let another man see that strength begins with confrontation. Then, like this video, not for likes, for leadership. For the moment you stop being triggered and started being trained, and subscribe. Because here we don't wear pain, we weaponize it with the precision of Napoleon Hill, with emotional discipline, with unstoppable clarity. Let's lead. You've been carrying emotions that don't belong to you. Shame from someone else's failure, guilt from someone else's opinion, fear from someone else's voice. You've absorbed the weight of past moments, of unhealed conversations, of silent rejections, and made them your identity. But identity built on emotional residue is not identity. It's a mask, a survival mechanism. And the longer you wear it, the more you forget who you really are underneath. That's the cost of low emotional intelligence. You confuse your reactions with your reality. You confuse your wounds with your worth. You start living based on pain instead of purpose. But that ends now. Because emotional intelligence isn't just a skill, it's your liberation. It's the process of removing everything you're not, so you can finally operate as everything you are. And that process is not easy. It demands confrontation, it demands discipline, it demands the willingness to look at every emotional habit that's kept you small and destroy it with action. I, Napoleon Hill, taught that every man has the power to choose his thoughts, but choice requires awareness, and most men have never even seen the inner programming that's running their lives. They think they're logical, but they're emotional. They think they're clear, but they're clouded by old beliefs. They think they're strong, but they're one insult away from collapse. That's not power. That's emotional fragility disguised as strength. True strength is quiet. It's grounded. It doesn't react. It doesn't flinch. It doesn't panic. And it's not born from affirmations. It's built through training, through intentional rewiring, through daily decisions to act from mission, not emotion. So how do you start rewiring? You stop making your feelings the center of your focus. You don't ignore them, but you don't obey them either. You acknowledge, you analyze, you act. That's the process. You feel the reaction. You trace it back to its source. You separate the fact from the fiction. And then you decide what the highest version of you would do. Not the emotional version, not the insecure version, the trained version. And here's the truth. You won't always feel like doing it. But emotional intelligence doesn't wait for motivation. It lives by command. You command your state, you command your focus, you command your energy, especially when you don't feel like it, because every time you act with discipline in the face of discomfort, you break the old code. And that broken code is replaced with power, with presence, with precision. Precision is everything. When you're emotionally intelligent, you no longer waste time explaining yourself to people who don't get it. You no longer drain energy overthinking conversations. You no longer carry emotional baggage into new environments. You walk in with clarity. You speak with certainty. You operate with force. Not because you're trying to prove anything, but because you finally trained yourself to move without emotional interference, and the results? You become consistent. Your leadership sharpens, your execution accelerates, your vision becomes clearer, because your internal world is no longer a battlefield, it's a command center. That's the shift, that's the advantage, that's the edge. So ask yourself, what emotions have I let shape my actions this week? What feelings have I obeyed that I should have questioned? What internal habits are still dictating my external results? Find them, face them, then move. Choose the opposite. If you would normally retreat, advance. If you would normally explode, breathe. If you would normally suppress, express with control. And when you do, you begin to rewire not just your brain, but your identity. This is how real change happens. Not through information, through transformation, through fire, through repetition, through ruthless self-awareness. So right now, pick one moment from today where you almost lost your state, where you reacted instead of responded. Write it down, break it apart, and decide, how will I lead differently next time? Comment below that moment. Declare your new response. Let the world see the man who's rewriting his emotional code. And if this message became your mirror, share it. Let it reflect strength into another man's silence. Then, like this video, let it seal your decision to stop being driven by the past and subscribe. Because here, we don't manage emotions. We master them with Napoleon Hill's principles. With precision, with force, let's dominate. You walk around with a calm face, a steady tone, a strong posture. But inside there's noise. Noise that never stops. Noise that questions. Noise that doubts. And no one sees it because you've learned how to hide it. How to package yourself in strength while you wrestle silently with waves of emotion you don't fully understand. That's not mastery, that's masking. And masks get heavy. Eventually they crack, and when they do, the breakdown is brutal. That's why emotional intelligence is not optional. It's the difference between managing the noise or being devoured by it. You're not weak for feeling. You're weak for not knowing what to do with what you feel. That's what keeps men stuck, not the pain, the avoidance, the performance, the denial, the fake confidence that disappears the moment reality confronts it. But that can't be you anymore, because now you know what's at stake, your mission, your legacy, your identity, and no mission is safe in the hands of a man who can't master his emotion. I, Napoleon Hill, never wrote for the emotionally numb. I wrote for the emotionally dominant, for the men who feel everything but lead anyway, for the men who process pain, not as victims, but as visionaries. Because pain, when properly trained, becomes power. Criticism, when processed through discipline, becomes clarity. Conflict, when handled with precision, becomes growth. That's what emotional intelligence unlocks, the ability to turn fire into fuel, not flames. So how do you keep building this fire? You build it in pressure. You don't avoid difficult people. You use them to sharpen your presence. You don't run from failure, you study it with detachment. You don't shrink in pain, you expand in it. Because every emotionally difficult moment is your chance to harden your edge, to build the internal frame that cannot be shaken by storms. And this frame is not just mental, It's physiological. Your body must learn the rhythm of regulation. When your chest tightens, you don't flee, you breathe. When your mind races, you don't panic, you anchor. When your voice shakes, you don't silence it, you slow it down. This is your new pattern, your new default, your new baseline. But here's the truth. None of this happens by chance. It happens by choice. You must choose daily to live with awareness, to catch the pattern, to correct the response, to rehearse the state you want to lead from until it becomes who you are. That's the grind. And the reward is emotional stability. In a world that thrives on chaos, stability is rare, and that's why it's powerful. The emotionally intelligent man stands out, not because he yells, but because he doesn't. Not because he fights, but because he doesn't flinch. His presence commands respect before he speaks, not because he's perfect, but because he's precise, and precision is the result of mastery. And mastery is the result of repetition. So repeat this. I do not react. I respond. I do not obey emotion. I observe it. I do not fear conflict. I lead through it, say it, live it, build it into your code, until your environment begins to adapt to your presence, not the other way around. That's how leaders are made. They train when others distract. They evolve when others excuse. They rise when others spiral. And their rise is not a fluke. It's engineered. So right now, engineer your rise. Name the emotion that keeps hijacking your focus. Is it insecurity? Is it resentment? Is it shame? Don't justify it. Don't explain it. Kill it with movement, with decision, with a standard that no longer makes room for emotional weakness. Comment below the emotion you're killing today. Say it, own it, replace it. And if this message stripped you of excuses, share it. Let it armor another man with clarity. Then like this video. Let it mark the moment your emotions stopped running the show, and subscribe. Because here we don't react, we rise. With the fire of Napoleon Hill, with emotional intelligence that can't be shaken, let's finish this. You've done enough pretending, enough performing, enough living behind the mask of composure while your mind burns with overthinking, regret, resentment, self-doubt. You've worn strength like a costume, hoping no one sees how close you are to unraveling. But deep down, you've known the truth all along. You don't need to be rescued. You need to be rewired. And emotional intelligence is the code you've been missing, the final shift from reaction to rule, from chaos to clarity, from noise to leadership. This isn't about managing feelings, it's about mastering your internal kingdom so thoroughly that no storm outside can move what's built inside. You are not your triggers. You are not your trauma. You are not the emotional habits you learned from broken men who never did their own work. You are potential in waiting, but potential without power is just pressure, and pressure destroys untrained men. That's why the final war is not against the world, it's within, against the part of you that still flinches when criticized, that still folds when challenged, that still doubts when doors open. That part must die, and you don't kill it with comfort. You kill it with confrontation, with doing the hard thing on command, with showing up with presence when your body wants to disappear, with staying when it would be easier to quit, because that presence is your new weapon, your new edge, your new proof that you are no longer emotionally enslaved. You are emotionally equipped. I, Napoleon Hill, taught that your only limitations are the ones you accept. And emotional chaos is the most accepted limitation among men today. They normalize overreaction. They rationalize withdrawal. They celebrate being numb as if it's strength. But numbness is not power. It's paralysis. And if you don't feel, you can't lead. If you can't process, you can't build. And if you can't dominate your emotions, you will forever be a passenger in your own life, but not anymore. You're done playing small to stay emotionally safe. You're done avoiding confrontation to protect your feelings. You're done holding onto old wounds as an identity. You are not a broken boy trying to survive. You are a trained man built to lead, built to feel everything and still make the right decision, built to take hits and keep building, built to rise above not because it's easy, but because it's necessary, and now that responsibility is yours. To become the man who owns his inner state with such intensity that nothing external can override him. That's the final level of emotional intelligence. Not just being aware, but being unshakable. Being so aligned that nothing derails your mission. Not people, not pain, not pressure, and it's not something you hope for. It's something you build, daily, relentlessly, through every hard conversation you lean into, through every emotion you process instead of projecting, through every time you respond with fire when fear tries to hold you. This is how you become the man others look to when everything breaks down. Because while they react, you lead. While they spiral, you build. While they explode, you expand. So ask yourself right now, who do I become when I stop reacting to life and start designing it? When I stop being emotional and start being elite? That man is inside you. You've seen glimpses of him, in moments of clarity, in moments of fire. Now he becomes permanent, not by magic. By mission. Write your mission, say it out loud, burn it into your code, comment it below. Let this moment be public. Let the world see you crossed a line and never look back. And if this message was the spark, share it. Let it light the fire in another man's chest. One who's still pretending, still performing, still hiding behind the myth of strength. Then like this video. Let it mark the day you became emotionally unshakable, and subscribe. Because here, we don't play with power, we forge it. With the fire of Napoleon Hill, with the emotional intelligence that rewires everything. You've done enough watching. Now you build, now you own, now you rise.